And welcome to this exciting episode of the Media Tech Podcast. Today we have Brad Rickberg. How's it going?
Good, Matt. How are you?
Good.
Awesome.
Today is going to be a good podcast. It's going to be a really informative one for just about anybody, not even specifically like filmmakers or producers or whoever, but I think it could apply just about anybody that's trying to find a job. But first, I know we've talked about it in the podcast before, but what is your role here at Media Tech?
Sure. So I am the Director of Career Services, so basically in charge of job placement, career development, the first thing I try to do is just figure out, what the student's goal is upon graduation, what they're trying to accomplish. Everybody here is different. You might think that all the recording art students are the same or all the film. No, I mean, everybody is different. Mm-hmm. Everybody's different. Everyone has different strengths, different weaknesses. Some people are looking to be largely in business for themselves and do their own productions or recordings or whatever it may be. Some are really looking to get hired somewhere full time. Some are looking for a combination of both. Some are oriented to really like to work in a collaborative environment with a lot of different people, and they're more like organizers and producer types. And then others are more technical. I hate using that term, but they like to kind of work on their own a little bit more independently, and they can just kind of get lost in the flow of what they're doing, right. Working in the studio or working on a computer.
Gotcha. And so, I mean, your job is mainly to place students, right? Is that? I mean, I graduated almost 10 years ago, and I get emails from you quite a bit, about different opportunities that are available. I mean, that's such a valuable resource to graduates. And does that take most of your time, you would say?
Oh yeah, that is the number one. The number one priority of what I need to do. Media Tech needs to make sure that students, had a worthwhile investment here, that they got out of it what they wanted, right. And that they are able to work in that field.
Gotcha. And so I guess that's a good segue to what we're going to talk about mainly is resumes and cover letters. So at Media Tech, you also instruct students, is that correct? And you talk to them about a lot of things that they'll encounter post-graduation, but I assume that resumes and cover letters are a big portion of that.
Oh, absolutely. Those are two of the biggest assignments that are in the business communications class that every student takes in their final semester. Mm-hmm. I get to know these students before they're in my final semester and get to work with them, and I've taught some other classes along the way here and there, but that can sometimes change. But what's consistent is in their final semester, they are in that business communications class. Hopefully they've done a resume before in their life. Sometimes I get classes and I'm just surprised where, it's kind of the luck of the draw that most of them have not. And other times I've had ones where most of them have. Mm. But whether they have or they haven't, what they probably don't have, most of them, is a resume that really reflects what they're going for.
Right.
That's more of a kind of a chronological, typical resume that gives a blow by blow of all the jobs that they've had, their work history, right. Which is a component of what I'm trying to teach them is something called a functional resume, which emphasizes their skills, because most of them, now we do have some students who have great industry credits all over the place. I mean, a long list of them, but we don't expect that our students are going to have a long list of industry credits. We're hoping they might have some things that we can kind of put up as sort of like, career highlights or recent credits,
right.
And that's probably all they have, but just kind of put it like that. And then the work history is still relevant, but we're emphasizing their skills in this industry. So we start off, and it doesn't have to be exactly like this, but this is just kind of the formula that you have your contact information up top. You have your little career summary next, where you just a couple of sentences of sort of your elevator pitch, which we work on some other assignments before we even get to the resume.
Cool.
So that it's kind of like a resume builder. And then just a bulleted list of skills, industry skills first, every piece of, I'd say, what are all the software that you've used, Pro Tools, what else, Logic, FL, Ableton, that's on the recording art side.
Right.
Adobe Audition, same thing on the film side, and then what's the hardware? What cameras have you used? What other support gear with cameras? On the audio side, what kind of mixers? Just those are the things that kind of pop out to people anyway. They just, the eyes of an employer looking at a resume, people are getting less and less literate anyway, so they're looking at key words that pop out to them.
Right.
Names of software, names of hardware, numbers, dates, links. Those are the things that really pop out. So we go, after we do the bulleted skills or whatever, then we get into what I called and also along the line of the skills. Skills can be other types of skills also, just interpersonal skills, office skills. Sometimes that could be a separate little section of miscellaneous skills, but obviously anything they have in terms of speaking another language or
Office
working with
skills is
kids,
big. Yeah.
office skills, CPR, any of those kinds of things. Any other, and that could sometimes be at the bottom along with other types of certifications, certified forklift driver. Well, that's just good for people to know. It's also memorable. They're like, oh yeah, you're the one.
You're the forklift driver.
You're the forklift driver. Or do life saving or whatever it may be. But we hit those recent credits kind of after the skills or, career highlights. And a lot of times it might be a student project, but they don't have to say student project
Right.
on it. The only time I tell them to kind of qualify it is if they're doing like a knockoff commercial or something.
yeah.
Don't say you really did the Zaxby's commercial.
Yeah. Would you say spec? Or
Yeah, like spec. That's a great,
Yeah.
yes. Often I'll call that we use these two, and you don't use it in class, but in the industry they call a lot of those things spec spots.
Yeah.
And that's fine. And that's the kind of stuff to definitely have on your reel.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure, so they can see what you're capable of. But just, if you did a student film, just say short film.
Yeah.
Leave it at that. And I also try to provide a lot of opportunities to the students while they're in school to, actually work on real professional jobs and get real credits too.
Which I want everybody that's listening to take note of that, because that is huge. I mean, not a lot of places allow students to do that kind of thing and encourage them to work while they're in school in that industry. A lot of times at MediaTek using MediaTek's gear. And also here, the instructors not only encourage students to do that, but will help find them work. That's so cool to me. That's always been one of the highlights of the education that I got here.
That's awesome. That's true. And they do it on the recording side as well. Nagaris, who's now the chair of the recording arts department, he's always had a lot of his own clients and stuff, and he always gets students involved in that. And what I tell students on these recent credits and stuff, a lot of them don't remember. They don't put it down. After I talk to them, we have an interview as part of their midterm, and I start getting this stuff out of them. I'm like, well, didn't you? They'll say, yeah, something with Nagaris Johnson. I'm like, well, what did you do just one thing with Nagaris? Oh, no. I was like, well, how many? Sometimes it's like 10 things. I'm like, were they all with the same person? The vocalist or whoever it may. Oh no, all did. Well, who were all of those people? To actually itemize that stuff, and it's real easy to forget. But it's just like while you're doing something. And social media to me makes it so easy now.
I wanted to get to that because you have a good way of remembering your projects.
That's
I want
right.
to get to that.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, just post about it.
Yeah.
What are we doing? Who's this? Who is this for? Just get all those particulars and make a little social media post. Then you can easily scroll through stuff as you're like trying to remember what to put on your resume.
Right. And what's cool, again, anybody that might be listening, check out the MediaTek Dallas Facebook page and just start scrolling. You'll see Brad with so many different students on so many different posts doing so many different cool things. He's definitely, I really like that system because those students can go through, I don't know if they're tagged or not, but they can go through the page and just see, oh, I did that. Like they might not even remember, you could give me a year and $100,000 and tell me to think about what I did in school, and I probably can't remember half the stuff I did, but those students
easily.
will always remember it,
Yes.
So what would you say are like the most common mistakes that someone could make when putting together a resume?
Giving too much detail on, having the resume too long.
Right.
And people don't want to read all that stuff. We don't need a 5-page resume that could have just as easily been on 1 page.
Exactly. I was going to ask that. Are you a 1-page person?
Try to do the 1-page thing. Where some people, 2 pages might be okay, especially if you combine it with your references. We do tell them to have a reference list that could be a separate list, but it can also be combined. I mean, some people are kind of struggling with what to put on their resume. I'm like, well, use your references. And we do have great references just here at MediaTek. Again, they can list, Nagaris Johnson, and they could list him as chair of the Recording Arts, but they could also say gold record award-winning engineer, and same thing with John Brown. And, just so many of our instructors here, have, legit industry credits that
Absolutely.
they can use. So I say kind of mix it up. You might, I say if they're using me, that they're better off saying president of Channel 3 Productions than director of career services, just because, people are going to look like, oh yeah, that's the guy that's like trying to get you a job.
Exactly. That's interesting. I've only been through a couple of hiring processes myself, but I do remember specifically, like if it's past 2 pages, I would just like not even get it. Like I just wouldn't. It would. I hate to say it, but it would almost not even be considered at that point because, I would always find the person that I was had a preference to based on their resume, and that was usually a 1 or 2 pager, and then I would get on. It's like I don't want to read all this because I've already got this other guy that I really like. Personally, it would put me off if it was more than a couple of pages.
I mean, if you can't figure out how to best edit and format and sell yourself in a concise way, I mean, that's what you kind of need to be able to do in this industry.
Exactly, that's a good point.
So we want to see them do it. Just to finish out the resume thing, I just wanted to say that I don't want to ignore their work history.
Yeah.
I think it is relevant that they worked at Chick-fil-A, because that means they worked with the public
That's
in
a good
customer
point.
service. And if you get a job with PSAV or one of those types of companies, guess what? You're going to be working with customers. And I actually heard, it was actually someone from JSAV said this in a class. I thought it was really very good information. She said that, we expect students from MediaTek, when they graduate, that they're going to have great technical skills. We're not worried about that. We're not worried about that we have some new piece of gear that MediaTek didn't have, because we can easily train them.
Right.
We know that they're trainable. What we can't train is customer service skills and organizational skills. That's something people either have or they don't. So if their work history shows, Chick-fil-A, or if it shows, warehouse or whatever it might be, that's very relevant that they have good organizational skills at the warehouse and customer service skills at the restaurant.
That's a good point. Like a question I would have about that is like, let's say someone that's maybe like in my stage of their career, right? Like maybe 10 years or so into it, that already has enough relevant experience within the field to fill a resume. Would you still suggest that person put in Chick-fil-A? Or like, for instance, I was a bartender through college. Like, do you think that should stay on the resume throughout?
Well, if you have enough experience working in the industry, and you've shown, because the work history shows like longevity and that you've stayed at a certain place and that kind of thing, you don't. It's not necessary at that point if you have enough of it.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I never would have thought about the customer service aspect. That's really valuable.
Well, yeah, because if you've now got this experience working with other AV companies, then you've got, or if you've worked with clients for a certain number of years, well then that demonstrates your ability to work with customers.
That's a good point. So let's move on to cover letters.
Yes.
What is your definition of a cover letter for those? Because I constantly hear people like, what is a cover letter? Like, I remember the first few times that I was applying, like I had written them through school here, but it was still so daunting. It's like a resume seems so tangible, but a cover letter is like so nebulous. It seems like at first,
The cover letter is just a way to sort of personalize your skills and credentials that you're putting out on your resume, which you might have that little brief couple sentence thing at the beginning. but then the cover letter kind of can fill that out a little bit more and just be a personal appeal. And, cover letters are still, it's essential that they know how to do a cover letter and that they have a kind of a base cover letter that they can modify.
Exactly.
And it might be used as a follow-up letter or a thank you letter as well. But at the same time, it hasn't become, it's not required 100% of the time as it was before, but it's still very important for them to have it. And the biggest part of it is just making that personal appeal. Mm-hmm. So the most important part of the cover letter to me is just the very beginning, what I call the hook. Just like a song has a hook,
right.
The cover letter's got to have a hook. And it's something that or attention getter. And the best hook is when you have some sort of personal ties, something where you met them at a networking event, or you saw, or you were or somebody, or John who works with your company suggested
right.
I get in touch with you, and then always being positive and gracious, thanking them for something they haven't even given you yet. Just thanking them right off the top. Thank you for taking the time. I've ever since Mary told me about. If you have something like that, that's going to be awesome. But a lot of times you're writing a cover letter, you've never met anybody
totally
there.
Cold.
Then you just need to come up with something that's a little bit more of an attention getter, which could be something that shows your insight into their company and tie that into your own personal story and strengths. Mm-hmm. So that's going to require you boning up on the company. So we have a whole other assignment we do in my class where I have them research a company.
Oh, cool.
And and I have like a little questionnaire that I just say, just do your best, of figuring this out, of just obviously what are their products and services shouldn't be too hard to figure out. Stuff like company culture. I mean, sometimes they do have a thing that says a lot of people don't even know what company culture means. I'm just like, well, that just means just what kind of place is it to work? What's the environment? How big? How small? Is it a national company? Is it a little mom and pop? How do people dress when they're there? Just see what you can draw from the website and their social media. Sometimes you have to go to their social media to really
right.
learn what you're really looking for. But then, researching who the leadership is there, and just recent news is a great thing to look at. A lot of them have like an actual news thing,
or a blog or whatever,
or they'll just have examples of their work or clients or whatever. Just find something that you can latch on to.
Yeah.
Oh, I saw this. I saw that event, or I saw that you did this event.
Yeah.
Sometimes you might have a commonality just with one of their clients.
Yeah.
Something. It's just like when you're meeting somebody, you try to find that common thread that that both of you have an interest in.
Exactly.
To continue the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even as far as like if it's a product, manufacturer or something, I sometimes I fall into the trap when I'm writing a cover letter, and I haven't written one in quite a while. But I've been like, I've always been a fan of your business and your products, and I go back into my history because I've been lucky enough to up to now work with companies that I have a personal history with almost exclusively. But what would you say? I mean, a cover letter to me is 2 paragraphs. Is that about standard? Is that what you recommend?
Yeah, 2 to 3.
Yeah, and it needs to be pretty short and brief, right?
Yeah, and the key is really the hook at the beginning and your close at the end.
Yeah. The
stuff in the middle, you're going to have a lot of that. I mean, you don't need to repeat everything that's on your resume.
Exactly, yeah.
You can summarize, if there's something that you just want to kind of detail a little bit more or something like that, or just give a very tangible example of something that you do, as opposed to just, I'm a self-starter, or I think outside the box. I mean, all those kind of things that are just cliches, basically.
Everybody says,
they're so used to seeing that stuff. To just give it more of a practical, logical example of just like, when I arrive on set, I first evaluate the lighting requirements of the room and try to get that done real quickly because I know there's not a lot of time. I mean, that's just an example. Just where they're just like, oh yeah, where they can just get they can picture how you are when you're in a studio or on a set.
And I mean, you mentioned cliches. I think that's a big thing that we should mention is like try to avoid it. I don't know if you watch The Office, but there's an episode where Michael Scott is interviewing for a position at the corporate office, and he says, "My biggest weakness is that I care too much and I work too hard."
Yes,
And I swear, when I was in a hiring process at a company a little while ago, literally someone said that. Like, we asked what your biggest weakness is, and they're like, "Oh, I'm too passionate about my job." It's like, come on, like don't even go there.
Yeah, we have all that on the questionnaires that we do, which are good for, writing your cover letter, but they're also good to prep you for interviews and stuff like that.
And then last little question that I had personally, I'm absorbing a lot of this information. This is great. Obviously, modifying a cover letter is necessary every time you apply for a different job at a different company.
Yes.
But based off of like, for a lot of people, and whether it's recording arts or people like us, where we have, especially in Texas with no unions, we're generalists, really, right? Like, we have a whole lot of different skill sets across a wide range of either camera operating or editing or whatever. Do you recommend having a blanket resume without modifying it? Or if there's a job that's more video editor centric rather than filming, do you suggest editing your resume to fit more of that role every time? You know what I'm saying?
I could see that if you're shifting from something like being in front of the camera versus behind the camera to have separate resumes. If you have like an extensive writing background and a lot of writing credits, and that might be a small part of your general resume, but a larger part of another resume. I don't really see the point in between production and post-production on either the audio side or recording side. I think just combine that all together, show your background, your well-roundedness, and so forth.
Gotcha. That's valuable. Is there anything else you want to leave on?
Yeah, we'll leave on the close, because that's the other really important of the cover letter is you've got to close strong. And I always tell them to close with just a very confident, positive close that kind of tells them or warns them basically that they're going to be following up.
Right.
Instead of just setting this off I hope that you get in touch with me, to just be, to be assertive about it and just say, I look forward to discussing this with you, and I will follow up with you in the next whatever you decide. 2 to 3 weeks is usually a good one to throw out there.
So that's a question
so
too.
So that way they're not surprised when you call them. You already told them you would.
I mean, that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with is A, how soon should you respond? B, how aggressive should you be about responding? And C, I would say, would be with me, it's always kind of a game to try and get past the secretary to get to who you want to get to.
Yes.
Right? How aggressive do you suggest people be, and how soon should they follow up?
Well, I think the 2 to 3 weeks is good. You put that on the letter itself, and then definitely wait at that point till probably 3 full weeks have passed at that point, and then you call. And I always tell them that sometimes you might email. Possibly, you might just email the follow-up first, but calling is something that should still be done. And when you call, that's when you mention the secretary, always ask that person's name and write it down.
Interesting.
Because then that's another person. So you can use all this stuff. I talk about that hook at the beginning of just using somebody's name. That's my biggest. If I can get past that hook on the first part of the letter, the rest of it's done already.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part, is just that hook, and that may be the hook right there. Talk to Rosemary at your office. I understand you've been traveling. When you come up for air, I'd like to talk to you about the opportunity.
Right.
Blah blah blah. So you use that. And he's like, oh yeah, Rosemary, I love her.
And how do you have any tips for getting past the gatekeeper when you're on the phone with somebody? Because a lot of times they're super, I guess, protective, obviously.
Yeah, and you don't want to be overly assertive, basically. You just say, can I leave? If they say, just say, can I leave a message?
Gotcha.
To just definitely always ask if you can leave a message. And they may put you right into the voicemail. It seems like increasingly that's what they're doing.
Yeah.
Into the voicemail, which may or may not be listened to. I don't know. But definitely go ahead and ask if you can leave a message. Just don't be like, okay, well, when does he get back or whatever. I mean, just leave the message at that point.
Gotcha. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brad. That was super valuable.
Yeah.
I think we've had this in the past. I usually give an outro spiel for MediaTek, but whenever I'm with an instructor, I love for them to tell the listeners why they should consider taking a tour if they're interested in creative career. So why would you say?
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way you're going to get to know this school is to come here and not only check out the facilities, but check out the people here. And I don't just mean the staff and teachers, but the students.
Yeah.
And see why they're here and why they're staying here after class and why they don't want to go home. So, please come and visit us here at MediaTek.
Why they don't want to go home. That's a really good point. I remember when I came here, I was frequently up here of my own wanting, like until close, and they closed at 2 a.m., and they still do. So, but yeah, thank you again, Brad. If you're interested in a career in filmmaking, recording arts, mobile app development, animation, acting, and makeup, I think I got them all.
Yeah, good job.
Check out mediatek.edu and schedule a tour. Campuses in both Dallas and Houston. And when you get here, I promise you'll be sold. There's amazing facilities and even better instructors. So yeah, mediatek.edu, and we'll see you again next week with another podcast. Thank you.